Oh, I've just been sitting here sniffing candles for 5 minutes. Okay, good talk. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my May book haul. That time again where we talk about all the books that I acquired in the previous month, and today we have quite a stack. I'm gonna blame it on the fact that there was a lot of pre-orders that came out this month. I did do some book shopping early in the month and then in the middle of the month as well, just kind of like went out with friends and family, and obviously subscription boxes, things like that, but I'm gonna blame it on pre-orders, honestly. So there's quite a lot to get through today. It's a stack. I don't really know how it got this bad. I'm gonna be completely honest. It spiraled. So hopefully June will not be nearly as much. But let's just dive in because we've got a lot to talk about today. The first two are going to be the books that I got in my most recent Fairy Loot, which was the April theme, I believe. I don't remember what the theme was, but I'll leave that linked above as always if you'd like to check that out before continuing with like the next couple of minutes, as always, just as a warning. And this month we ended up getting 2 books, as sometimes they like to do. So the extra book that we got this month was An Arrow to the Moon by Emily X.R. Pan. This is like this beautiful cover, oh my goodness, and then they've got sprayed edges as well. It's also signed, look at that. I haven't read anything by Emily X.R. Pan, but I know that she has some very good books out there that some people very, very much enjoy. But this one is basically a reinterpretation of Romeo and Juliet, but it's based on Chinese mythology, and I believe magic is involved in some way. So it follows our main 2 characters, Hunter and Luna, and obviously their families do not get along. Hunter is really good with a bow and arrow, but the rest of his life is not so great. He would have run away if it wasn't for his brother. And then it also says an supernatural wind and a bewitching girl at his new school. And then we also follow Luna, whose parents' expectations are quite stifling on her, but there's this new boy at school, aka Hunter, who is keeping her interested. And also apparently there is some sort of like, I don't know, there's a lot of magical realism things to it from the back, which from what I understand this author has written quite a lot from like magical realism stuff. So I'm always up for a good retelling. I've never read anything by this author, but I have seen it circling, and so I'm very excited that we got this one in the box as like an extra book. And then the main book in this box was Blood Scion, and this is by Deborah Fale. I still don't know how to pronounce this. Beautiful cover. Underneath the like dust jacket, there's a beautiful hardcover as well. It very much gives off the like library binding vibes. So really everything about this is beautiful. I'm not sure if it's based on any sort of mythology at all. We do follow our main character Sloane, who is a descendant of the ancient Orsha gods, and she is it seems very much like fantasy dystopian in a sense, because it sounds like there's going to be a corrupt government. People don't like her for her kind of abilities and her skills, and so her mother hides her away, but her abilities kind of show themselves on her 15th birthday, and so she is basically put into the army, and she has to conceal her power and overcome all of the challenges that go with this kind of training. And then I think, of course, she'll fall for probably somebody in the army or like one of the higher ups, maybe the prince or something. But it's giving off those like militia, military fantasy, dystopian vibes. I'm not really sure what we're getting into with this one, but I have had very good luck with Fairy Loot boxes as far as the books in them, so I am very excited to give this one a chance as well. But yeah, those were my 2 Fairy Loot books. And then the next 3 books actually have nothing to do with each other except for that I've talked about this on this channel a few times, but every once in a while, like at work, we'll hit like a goal, and the reward for said goal is that I will get a book. And so the next 3 just happen to be well, two and a half kind of happened to be that. So I ended up getting The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J Maas, which is a bunch of Throne of Glass novellas, but I've heard that like this, you're supposed to read this first before you start the Throne of Glass series, and I picked up the first one a couple of months ago. So I did pick this one up. I'm not sure when I'm going to start this series, but I have heard from one of you lovely people that I need to read this one first. So it sounds like it's a book of novellas, which great, love that. And then we can continue with the rest of the series. I'm a little bitter because it doesn't quite fit size-wise with my Throne of Glass book. Very annoyed about that, but that's beside the point. I don't know a whole lot about what this is about, obviously, because it's a bunch of novellas, but it says here on the back that it's like a prequel, or a bunch of prequels to the series. So, very excited to continue, or to start this, but I did pick this one up so that when I do eventually start the Throne of Glass series, I can start with this one. And then I picked up a Nancy Goldstone book because I have very quickly become obsessed with her stuff. You guys have seen it, but that is The Maid and the Queen, The Secret History of Joan of Arc. This is a nonfiction book about Joan of Arc. And like I said, I've really become obsessed with Nancy Goldstone. I swear, every time I read another one of her books, I like want to dive into all of her stuff. And so this is just the one that I picked up. And she's got a couple more that are out there that I just don't own yet. But I think Joan of Arc is a very fascinating character, and I'm very interested to see how she's going to do this. It is sectioned in 3 different sections. The one is like before Joan, then during her reign as Joan of Arc, and then after Joan. So I'm hoping to read this one in June. But yeah, I did end up picking up this nonfiction, and I'm very excited. It's very floppy, which is quite a lot of fun. And then the last one that I kind of picked up was because it's one that my boss had read, and like someone at work had suggested it to him, so he picked it up and really enjoyed it and said, well, if you want to get this one, go for it. And so I said, sure, why not? And that is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but it's a self-help book of sorts, so I'm hoping to dive into this one at some point. So I'm very interested to pick this one up at some point. I have no idea when I will, but yes, I bought this because a lot of people at work have been reading it. And then, I'm doing this in sections actually, the next 3 I got when I visited my parents at the very beginning of the month. They had this beautiful coffee shop slash bookstore, and of course I had to walk out with a couple of things, and so I did. So the first one is one that you've seen before, and that is The Gonkel by Stephen Rowley. This is a contemporary story of sorts that follows our main character Patrick, and he's called Gay Uncle Patrick, aka Gup, and his niece and nephew come visit him in Palm Springs like every weekend. He were there, a week in the summer, stuff like that. But then something happens and their parents end up passing away, and so Patrick ends up being their guardian, and he's trying to learn how to be basically a parent instead of just like the fun gay uncle. Like, now how does he be like the parent to these kids? Plus I'm sure there's going to be a lot of talk of like grief and stuff, because obviously not only do these kids lose their parents, but Patrick will have lost a sibling. So I'm curious to see how this works, but it sounds like a good, it's gonna hit your heartstrings kind of book, and I've had my eye on it for a while. So when I saw it there, I was like, well, you're coming home with me. I picked one up that I've had my eye on for quite a while, and that is 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. This is a kind of reimagining of Greek mythology. Of course, are we at all shocked? I don't know exactly what this book is about, but I know it follows the women during the Trojan War, which is a story that you never see the women's perspective of. Well, you don't see the women's perspective of in most Greek mythology, but specifically this kind of war book. But it doesn't say if it follows anything specifically, or if it's just a bunch of like smaller stories that follow all of these different women, because as you kind of like go through this book and like see the beginning of chapters, they each follow like a different person. So I'm curious how that's going to work. I'm curious to see some of the women. I'm specifically interested to see if like Helen, the character of Helen, which is supposed to be like the reason the Trojan War was a thing, is going to be represented in this book. So I love Greek mythology. I love feminist kind of twists on Greek mythology, and also like how beautiful this like foiled cover is. But I've had my eye on this for quite a while, so I decided to just go ahead and pick it up. And then the last book I got there is one I don't even know what it's about, to be honest, and that is The Ghost of Blackwood Hall, which is another Nancy Drew book. I had collected these beautiful editions of them, but my uncle actually gifted me a bunch of these over the course of many years growing up, and so now whenever I see a edition, like this kind of edition of a Nancy Drew book that I don't own, I pick it up, and this is just one that I didn't own. So again, I have no idea what it's about. I picked it up because of the edition, and I know that we didn't have it, so yeah, very helpful, I'm sure, but Nancy Drew, so mystery. So the next one is one of my pre-orders for the month, and that is Bravely by Maggie Stiefvater. This is kind of a reimagining, obviously, of Brave, which is a Disney princess. It even says it on the back here, like it's got like the Disney logo and Brave on it, so this is like straight up Disney approved. It's been marketed as like what comes next for Brave. It says here on the front, what if you had 1 year to save everything you loved? And then on the back here it says 1 princess, 2 gods, 3 voyages, 4 seasons. So basically, from what I can gather from the inside of this, Merida is very kind of bored. Her life is very stagnant. Everything is very, you know, nothing crazy is happening. And so then at one point, 2 different gods show up, and somehow she has a year to save everything. Don't know how she's going to do that. It says that she's going on adventures of many sorts to different, like, villages here and there. I don't really know how it's going to go, but I love Brave. It's one of my favorites, and this cover is beautiful, and I'm just very excited to see this look at this story, because I love this story so much. So yes, my pre-order came in. Actually, I pre-ordered it because I got it signed and personalized. Isn't that, look how fun that is. So yeah, I'm excited because the last Maggie Stiefvater book that I read was her Shiver series, which was about werewolves, and I read that way back at like the beginning of high school, I want to say. So I haven't read much from this author, but I know that there are lots of things that people love from this author. So I'm excited. The next one is a book I picked up because of G at Book Roast was showing it in a very, like a recent haul of hers at the beginning of the month, and I was like, that sounds too good to pass up. And that is The No Show by Beth O'Leary. I think it just came out. I have not read anything by Beth O'Leary, but I've heard good things about her books, and this one just sounded the most interesting because it follows 3 different women who are complete strangers, but they all get stood up by the same guy, and then I think they become like friends to figure out what the heck happened. But they all got stood up on Valentine's Day, and I'm very interested about how this works because they all know him as like a different version of his name, which I don't know how that works at all, but I don't know, it just sounds really interesting. And the way it was presented to me on Goodreads was like kind of mysterious in the fact that like they don't know why he didn't show up, but maybe they find him. I don't know, but it's these 3 women trying to figure out what the heck happened and why they all got stood up, and I just think that sounds very, very interesting, and this cover is just so freaking pretty. I'm obsessed with, you know, these beautiful illustrated covers. It says here on the front, timing is everything, so I don't know what I'm getting into, but I'm very interested, and this is entirely Book Roast's fault. Putting the blame on her makes me feel better about myself. So the next one is yet another pre-order that I got in the mail this month. I'm very excited about it, and that is By the Book by Jasmine Guillory. This is a meant-to-be novel, which is a companion series that follows different authors writing books about different characters, but I think they're all loosely based on some sort of fairy tales. So the first one in this was If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy, which was loosely based on Cinderella, and this one is loosely based on Beauty and the Beast. And I have loved the things that I've read by Jasmine Guillory, so I'm excited about this one. We follow our main character, Isabel, and she works at a publishing house, but she is one of the only Black employees, and she's overworked and underpaid. And so she's trying to figure out how to kind of like step up, I guess, and make her voice heard, and so she overhears her boss complaining about this author whose manuscript isn't coming in time, and so she's like, ooh, I will do it. So she goes out to his house to basically try to give him, in her mind, just a quick pep talk. Maybe that'll like do it, and then he'll write the manuscript, and she'll be thought of as this great hero because she got this guy to write it. But then she learns more about him, and he's very reclusive, and they strike up, I think, a friendship of sorts. She learns more about him, and she's there while he's writing this manuscript to get it in time. So I am interested in this because publishing world always interests me, but I have loved the things by this author, and I'm very excited to see where this goes, and also the little bits here and there of the Beauty and the Beast that you can kind of see throughout the book. So fairy tale retelling of sorts. I am very excited about it. The next one is another pre-order that came through this month, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I've showed this a couple times on this channel already, but I know many of you have heard about this because like it just came out. But this one is her newest book, and it's about a book editor and a book publisher, I want to say. So we follow Nora, whose sister is like so important to her, but she's very much like the side character of her own stories, how she feels. And so her sister basically says, come spend August with me in this little itty town and let's just get away. And she's like, okay, fine. So she does, but then she ends up keep running into this book editor named Charlie, and it's the two of them and like this month vacation of sorts, and they keep running into each other. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of meet cutes, and she's going to become maybe the heroine of her story finally. I don't really know, but it sounds good, and I've heard incredible things about this. Like literally not a single negative word about this book at all. So I'm hoping to read it this summer because it feels quite appropriate. Maybe I'll put it off and read it in August since it takes place in August, but I think it's going to be so fun, and I've loved the one book I read by this author, but I'm excited to dive into her other things. And I mean, Book Lovers, I mean, what more do I need to know? Next one is a nonfiction book that I picked up because I really, really enjoyed the book. I listened to it on Audible and loved it so much that I picked it up. And that is Karamo by Karamo Brown. This is his memoir that came out in 2019. I loved it so much that we actually got it for my mother-in-law for Mother's Day because I just adored it so much. And then when we got her a copy, I was like, well, I have to get a copy for myself, of course. So I will tell you more about how I thought about this. But overall, really, really enjoyed it. It's very interesting to see his life, and he kind of formats this book in a very interesting way. So like, it's not chronological in a sense. It's more of like, here's a topic I really want to talk about, and here's all the bits and pieces of my life that make sense in this topic. Okay, the next chapter is this topic, and so on and so forth. And I'm a huge fan of the show Queer Eye. I'd love to get all of the memoirs by all the people who are on that show, and this just happened to be the first one that I picked up. I picked it up because I did enjoy it, but yes, I highly recommend if you like Queer Eye, if you like stories about hope, healing, that kind of stuff, because he leaves it all on the page. Like usually memoirs are very, very open, but this feels even more open than that. I don't even know how to explain it, but I needed my own copy because it was so good, so I picked it up. I then also picked up a couple more volumes of Spy Family, so we have 3 and 4, now that I was able to find 2, so now I can pick up more things. So I'm really excited to dive into this series a little bit more. I loved the first one so much, but like the idea of this, I've talked a lot about it recently because I've been picking them up now, but the idea of this is it is this family where you have this guy named Twilight, and he is a spy, and he is sent on a mission to infiltrate this boarding school of sorts. So he creates this family from this woman that he ends up hiring, but she's an assassin, but he hires her to be his wife, and this little girl that he kind of adopts from an orphanage who is a telepath to be his kid. And so they create this little family so that he can go on this mission. But they all have like that thing that's a little bit different, so their family's a little bit different. But I enjoyed the first volume so much. I'm hoping to get to the second one in June, so hopefully I will continue to pick up this series. I think there are 10 volumes total, if I'm correct, so I have quite a lot to pick up, but I did pick up the next 2 because now that I have the second one, I feel like I can pick up more, and I feel like the more I read them, the more I'm going to want to continue. So I got the next 2 volumes that I didn't have in this one. I also picked up the first 2 volumes of The Promised Neverland. I have had my eye on this one for a while. I mean, it's one of the, I think, the more popular ones out there. A lot of people talk about it. I don't know how many volumes there are, but I feel like there's a lot of volumes in this. But I was watching Princess in Paperback, her channel, and she did this kind of like manga recommendation for beginners kind of video, and I always think it's interesting to see what kinds of things that she recommends because she's a big manga reader, and she said that this is a good book if you like the Wayward Children series by Shauna McGuire, which you guys No, I very much do. So I got the first 2 volumes throughout the month because I've discovered that reading 1 volume is usually not enough. I would like to have a couple of volumes to really see if I like the book, because I know, like, there's sometimes where I've read 1 volume and gone, okay, this is just okay, and then you get to the 2nd volume and you're like, okay, now I like the series more. Or, you know, I just want to give them more than just the first one, because that's usually just the beginning. So I got the first 2 in this series, and I'm not fully sure what it's about, but it follows a bunch of kids at this place called the Gracefield House Orphanage, and the woman who's in charge of them, or who takes care of them, that they're forced to basically call mom, but she is like, I don't know, I think they find out some secrets about her, and so, like, maybe she's not who she says she is. I don't know. It sounds interesting. It sounds interesting, but I got the first 2 volumes, so we'll see if I enjoyed it. But I got it purely on the recommendation of, if you liked Wayward Children, you'd like this. So hopefully I'll get to this one and let you know if it is at all correct. The second one has books all over it, so that's exciting. That makes me interested, but I'd like to see why it's so popular. So yeah, I picked up those 2. The next book is the one that I got in my Unplugged Book Box for May, so I'll leave that linked above as always if you'd like to check that out. If you haven't already, if you don't want to get spoiled, this is your warning. But the book that I got in that box was Queen of the Tiles, and this is by Hannah Alkeef. This one sounds so interesting to me, because I think it's going to hit a lot of different genres. I think it's going to hit a lot of different things in this book, honestly. This one follows our main character, Najwa, and she is taking part in a Scrabble tournament, but it's basically her best friend died at said tournament the year before. She was her partner, her best friend, her, like, the queen of Scrabble, basically, and so she's decided to take place in the tournament again. But she's kind of, you know, still dealing with the fact that her best friend has passed away, things like that. But then her best friend's Instagram, I think it's her Instagram, or one of her social medias, starts posting again. And she's like, excuse me, what? But they're posting things that are like, maybe her death was not as accidental as people were thinking it was. Maybe some more nefarious things are going on. So not only is she dealing with this competition, dealing with the grief of her best friend passing, but also now all of a sudden there's this mystery element to it. And it sounds so interesting. I'm so excited to give this a try. I would love to dive into this one soon. But yeah, that was the book that we got in May's box, and I am very happy about it, actually. Sometimes those books are hit and miss with me as far as, like, how interested I am with them, but this one's a hit. I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be really good. The next book is another book box subscription of sorts, and that is Book of the Month. My aunt, the Book of the Month subscriber, sent it to me and said, hey, here's, like, you can get a book for like $5. And I was like, well, if you insist. So I put it off until I found one that I really enjoyed. Nothing in April looked good to me. Nothing in March particularly looked good, but something in May did. So I ended up getting Darling Girl, and this is by Liz Majalski, I think. And this is a Peter Pan retelling, but like dark. Like, it sounds, I don't know, it sounds dark. This sounds very convoluted, but very good. So we follow our main character, Holly, who was the granddaughter of Wendy. Yes, that Wendy. And she is, you know, just living her life. She's got a son. She's got a daughter that's unfortunately been in a coma for many, many years, has a very bad illness, but it's kind of like hiding away. And then one day she gets the call that her daughter has gone missing, and she's like, the only person who could do it is Peter Pan. I mean, he's not the fairy tale creature that everyone thinks that he is. And so there's some secret that her daughter has about her son, and she's trying to protect both of her kids. She's trying to get them back from Peter. Her mom won't, who is, you know, Wendy's daughter, Jane, won't see Peter as anything but like the hero, even though Holly is like convinced like he's not the hero, but you know, she won't listen to her. So she enlists the help of this guy named Christopher Cook. And I'm wondering if he's supposed to be he's an ex-soldier, so I'm wondering if he's going to be like related to Hook in some way. I'm not sure, but it sounds so interesting, and I have not read any Peter Pan retellings, I don't think, but there's just something about this that like grabbed my attention. It seems twisty, and I'm excited to dive in. So hopefully this fall sometime, maybe I'll get around to this one. But I did finally take part in book of the month, so we'll see how long I do it. I'll probably keep it up and then just like skip a bunch of months until something looks good again, but yeah, I'm excited about this one. I think it's gonna be really good. The next one is a little silly because I already have a copy of this book, but it's so pretty, and that is A Daughter of the Trolls by Mackenzie Catron, but this is a hard, whoa, I've got all of my promotional things falling out now. It's a hard cover that you get from Amazon, and it's got all of the beautiful illustrations in it, like the paperback copy that I do have of it does, but the paperback copy I have is one that was kind of like an ARC. I mean, it's a finished copy, but it was gifted to me a few months in advance to read and kind of like get, like the hype up there. And I loved it so much that I was like, well, I need to support the author in some way. And she mentioned that there's a hardcover on Amazon, and I was like, well, this is beautiful. I need my own copy. So yes, I bought a book again. Yes, I've tabbed it in the exact same places that the paperback is tabbed in because I am obsessed with this story. It's one of my favorite books of the year. And oh, so good. But it's a YA fantasy book that follows our main character, Sparrow. She's 18 years old, and she has a heart condition that keeps her in a wheelchair. She lives in a glade, this place called the Glade, and it's a place of like all these different magical creatures, trolls, and I mean, there's so many things. I'm trying to see, there we go, trolls, imps, gnomes, and fairies. But there's also like evil, they call them boogeymen, but like these evil people that you like hear stories of growing up, but they're actually true. And so we've got one of them specifically called Black Annis, and she ends up showing up one night, and then terrible things happen, and so Sparrow ends up going on this adventure with her half-goblin best friend, Rush, and so it's the story of her going through the woods in a wheelchair, when woods are very much not wheelchair accessible and stuff. So I think it's the disability rep in here is incredible because it's also own voices, because the author has something very, very similar to what Sparrow has. And this is the first in a series, but I'm not sure if it's going to be like companion in the sense of it all takes place in this world, or if we're going to see these characters again. But I loved this one. I devoured it in a week, which is hard for me to do with a book that I don't have an audiobook for. If it's just the physical book, it takes me a while to get through them, but I devoured this book. And so I just wanted to support the author by getting my own copy, and also like this hardback is beautiful. So yeah, I did the thing when I didn't need to do the thing, but I did the thing anyway. Next two books came from a book fair that my husband was doing at one of his schools, and they're both by the same author. So we have The Unteachables and Linked by Gordon Corman, and they each seem to be very interesting. Like they talk about topics I never expect to see in middle grade. So this seems very familiar to The House in the Cerulean Sea to me, because this follows a group of, I think, 4 or 5 kids who are called the Unteachables, and they are taken out of their own class and put into like a separate class. And so it's all of them, and they all have something. Like, let's see, we've got one of the kids has an anger management issue, one of them can't read, one feels like she doesn't belong in any kind of class, and then you've also got the teacher, Mr. Zachary Kermit, who has been put in charge of these students. He had a cheating scandal that has followed his entire career, and he is one year away from early retirement, and the superintendent is like, haha, here, teach them. And so it's this group of people, but I think it's going to be very wholesome. It sounds like they're actually going to start learning some things, and it's going to be a very fun experience for them. But just something about that sounds really interesting. And then Linked, I'm trying to remember exactly what this one's about, but it's like dark. So it follows our 3 main characters, Link, Michael, and Dana, in this very quiet town, who wake up one day and come into school, and someone has come in and vandalized it by drawing a swastika in their school. And so it follows these 3 kids. Michael, who's the first person to see it, so everyone suspects it's him. Link, who's one of the popular kids in school, so everyone is looking to him to figure it out. And Dana, who's the only Jewish girl in town, and everyone is kind of treating her differently because of that. And it says here on the front, past, present, future, right, wrong, it's all connected. So I'm wondering if it's going to talk a lot about like the Holocaust, and like how the past and the present and the future all kind of are linked. But I don't know, it just sounds like it's going to have a nice mystery element to it, because you are trying to figure out what happened, but it's going to have this conversation that I think is going to be very, very interesting. So both of his books sound like they're going to hit on different levels, but they sound good. So a couple more middle grades that we've picked up. Next one is another pre-order that I got in the mail because I don't know, it sounds really, really good. And that is Set on You, and this is by Amy Lee. It says right here, he makes her heart race. And this is a debut rom-com, and we follow our main character, Crystal, who's a curvy fitness influencer. And so after a bad breakup, she goes to the gym, and she's like, this is my place of peace. This is like where I can, you know, get back to myself, kind of take a break. And then enter firefighter Scott, who is a new gym member, and he's very smug, and it says here that, like, he steals her favorite, like, racks and, like, favorite places to work out, and, like, they have this, like, super competitive streak, but then they end up showing up at their grandparents' engagement party, and so leading up to their grandparents getting married, they, like, learn more about each other. But it's all, like, set around fitness, which sounds really interesting, but what got my attention was the fact that this is not only is this a plus-sized main character, which is fantastic, we need a lot more representation of that, but it's plus-sized and as an influencer, as a physical gym fitness, that's what I'm looking for, a fitness influencer. And I haven't heard anything like this before, and it just sounds really, really interesting. So I'm excited to try it out. This is the debut, like I mentioned, so I'm curious to see what other things this author has in store, and how well this is received, but it sounds really good. So I can't wait to give it a try. Another book that I picked up is, I think, the last manga on this list, and that is a bind-up of volumes 1 and 2 of Madesama. And this one is by Fujiwara. This one I picked up. I know literally nothing about this, I'm not gonna lie. This one I picked up because this one, along with, like, a lot of the rest of them, I went out one day when my brother-in-law and his girlfriend were in town. His girlfriend and I went out and we did lots of book shopping, and it was so much fun, and I very much enjoyed it. But she watches anime, mentioned that this was a very good anime, and I saw the first 2, well, this was actually the only copy they had in the store, but the first 2 volumes bound up, and I said, okay, sounds good, and so I picked it up on her recommendation. So I'm not entirely sure what it's about, but it does say something on the back about, like, the student council president, and, like, he runs into this girl who works at a maid cafe after school, and, like, that's just enough to intrigue my attention. Also, like, highly recommended by her, so that's really all I needed to know. So I'm curious how this is going to work. It sounds like it's going to be a romance of sorts, and I don't know, it just sounds good. So I did pick this one up, and I'm excited to give it a try at some point, hopefully soon. I don't know when it's gonna be, but I'm excited. And the next good handful of books are all from my local used book warehouse that I love going to. The first one I know nothing about. I picked it up because of the author and the cover, and that is Arabella by Georgette Hare. This is this beautiful edition that actually matches this one that I've got here, which is the Old Shades. I've had that one for a while, and this is an author that I've been told, if you're a fan of Jane Austen, you will enjoy her books. And every time I go to this used bookstore, because that's where I got the first one, I look to see what other things they have in this edition. They've got a lot of stuff by this author, but I like these editions, and this is the first time they've had one in like 2 years, so I picked it up. I don't know what it's about, but it says here on the back, amazing how complicated life can get after one little lie gets around. That's all I know. I know nothing about this book, but it's this beautiful edition that I, you know, like I said, am a fan of, so I'm curious to see where this one goes, what it's really about, but I mean, that one line does very much interest me, so. It was right here, watch out Lizzie and Darcy in this Cinderella story with a twist. Yes, I'm excited. So I picked this one up for the author and the cover, and yeah, I have no explanation. The next one I'm so excited about is one that is the very last book in my Mallory series that I've been collecting that I don't have. I have them all now that I found this one. They haven't had this in the, like, I haven't been able to find this book anywhere except for, like, on Amazon. So I was really excited about it, and that is Stormy Persuasion by Joanna Lindsey. This is the second to last book in the Mallory series. I don't know about this one specifically. I think this book and the last book in the series kind of go together. I don't really know much about this book. I'm not gonna lie, I picked it up because of the series, but it is a series that follows a family, and so this is just one of the ones. These specifically follow Judith Mallory, and Jacqueline Mallory, maybe, which is one of our Mallory people that we've, basically the kids of one of the Mallory siblings that we've read about before. So it follows cousins, and I think one of them gets kidnapped. I'm not 100% sure, but this is the only one I didn't own, so now I own it, and I'm so excited, because, like, they never have this book. I always check, and they never have it, and I can't believe they have it, or they had it. I'm just, yeah. Oh, I'm so excited. So now I officially have my entire Mallory collection is complete, and now I just have to read them, which I am trying to do. Next one is actually the next couple are Highland romances, because of course they are. This one is actually, so this is the fourth in the series. I've tasked myself with finding this series, and I've seen a lot of them there, but the one time I went and actually was looking for them, I couldn't find them. But I found the fourth one, and that is The Viper by Monica McCarty. I actually read the Highland, the Highland Warrior, which is the first in a trilogy that she's written. This is a different series. This is called the Highland Guard. No, it's called a Highland Guard novel, but there's like 7 or 8 books, and this just happens to be the fourth one. Basically, this entire series follows a bunch of different people in this Highland Guard, which is the elite fighting force of this guy named Robert the Bruce, who is crowned king. And so he's got this Highland Guard who is, you know, there. And so each book follows somebody else in this guard. And in this one specifically, we follow the guy named Lachlan Viper, and he is just one of the guards. I don't really know a whole lot, but Highland, all I needed to know. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, I was hoping there'd be more, but I could only find that one, so I picked it up anyway. So the next one is a cover of sorts, and that's Highland Warrior by Heather McCollum. So this is one that, first off, beautiful, absolutely stunning cover. I picked it because my friend Taylor has talked about it a few times. She also has this. It's the second in the Sons of Sinclair, which is a Highland series that follows this Sinclair clan. And this one specifically follows a guy named Joshua Sinclair, and he is like done with fighting. He's like, I'm not fighting anymore. And this woman named Kara, who basically ends up sheltering him for some reason. I'm not sure what happens, but something happens at the beginning and she ends up sheltering him and basically tries to convince him to join her side and like protect her family or something. And he won't do it. I don't know if it needs to be read in order, because the first one, now I'm throwing books. I don't know if it needs to be read in order, if it's one of those books that's like more companion, because the first one in this is, I think, called Highland Conquest. I feel like it's a trilogy, but I might have made that up. But this cover, it's just so pretty. I think it's so pretty. And I mean, Highland romance. Tis all I need to know, honestly. The next couple are cover buys, for sure. Plus, I think they're both standalones, which I don't have very many standalones, honestly. And the first one is Dream Lover, and this is by Virginia Henley. And like, I picked it up because first off, this cover is beautiful, but also the step back. I mean, the step backs on both of these are just stunning. And this one follows our 2 main characters, Emerald and Sean. And many years ago, Emerald was swimming in this cave, and this guy showed up, and he was beautiful, and they like fell in love, and she doesn't even know his name. And many years later, she's like had her heart set on him, and many years later she's now forced to marry somebody that she despises, until he shows up and ends up kidnapping her because he wants revenge for being on a prison ship for 5 years. So he kidnaps the daughter of his enemy, thinking I'll seduce her and then just like leave her on the wayside because scandal will like ruin that family. But then he discovers that it's Emerald, and it's this girl that he kind of fell for when they were younger, and now that makes his job a little harder. Sounds interesting. Got it for the step back. The next one is Longing by Mary, I never know how to say her last name, Below maybe? And then again, beautiful, absolutely beautiful step back. So this one follows our main character, Cyan, I believe. And she is an illegitimate daughter, and so she kind of lives in this town where like there's the stigma that follows her because of that. And then this guy comes in to inherit this mill that her mother's people, is how she says here on the back, her mother's family works at. And so he ends up asking her to be the governess of his daughter. and he's widowed. I don't know what happened to his wife, but it says here that he's been widowed, and so he asks her to be the governess, and I think they will, well, I know that they will fall in love because of that. But again, step back cover by. So pretty. Also, I'm trying to widen my horizon of historical romance authors I've got, because I feel like I've got like 3 or 4, and that's it. So I'm trying to widen it to other things. So we'll see if those are any good. The last historical romance of sorts is Hitched to a Gunslinger by Michelle McLean. I have said on this channel many times, I am not a Western fan. I really am not. I don't like Western books. However, my friend Taylor picked this one up recently because she loved the cover, and I agree, beautiful cover. And it does sound somewhat interesting, I will not lie. I'm trying to remember exactly what this one's about, but I picked it up so that we could buddy read it one day. That's why. So it says here we follow our main character, Gary Quickshot Woodson, who was the fastest gun in the west of the Mississippi. But he's ready to hang up his hat, ready to have like just a good old retirement, you know, a small town, just wants to relax, you know. And his horse ends up dragging him to this town called Desolation, and he goes, great, this is exactly what I want. Relaxation. But it says here, soon he finds himself embroiled in a town vendetta and married to a woman named Mercy, who is anything but calm. So I don't know how that's gonna go, but I'm interested to see if this will change my mind about Westerns, because I don't know, I always steer clear of them, but this sounds interesting. This does sound interesting. The one nonfiction I got at said used bookstore is The Queen's House by Edna Healy, and this is the social history of Buckingham Palace, which I found very interesting. So it's basically like a biography of a place, and I think I don't know who originally like created it or like built it, but it just sounds really interesting, and I don't know, I like English history, and so this just sounded interesting because I like castles and things. So I am interested to see what this one's about. It does say things about Queen Victoria on the back, which is a queen that I find very interesting. So I'm curious to see. I am curious to see what little things I will find. I like the fact that it says social history, because like political and war and things like that, not the biggest fan of, but social I could do. So I think I'm going to really enjoy this one. Then the last things I picked up at that bookstore were 3 Agatha Christie books, because I am trying to collect them, but I'm trying to collect a very specific format of them, which is these kind of bigger paperback ones. So the first one I picked up was Crooked House, which I don't know anything about, but I know it's one of her books that's not like a Perot novel or a Miss Marple novel. It's one of her like standalones, I guess you could say, and it follows this big happy family who is living in a sprawling ramshackle mansion, but then the head of the household ends up being brutally murdered, and they have to figure out what the heck is going on. So that's what that one's about. And then I picked up one that I think is going to be really good for like the Christmas season, so maybe I'll read it in December or November, and that is Midwinter Murders, and it's about I think it's a collection of 3 stories, no, way more than that. It's basically a bunch of mysteries, smaller mysteries that are like short stories, but good for like the winter season. Again, I don't think there's anything specific in these. I mean, we might have a Perot one, I'm not sure, because there's so many in here. But it just says Fireside Tales from the Queen of Mystery. So I'm excited about this one. I think there's about 10 or 12 in here. So some good shorter things to pick up. And the very last one that I picked up is The Mysterious Fair at Styles. And this is the very, very first Perot book. So this is when the world was introduced to him as an inspector. Basically, we are trying to figure out, here's the question in this book. Who poisoned the wealthy Emily Inglethorpe, and how did the murderer penetrate and escape from her locked bedroom? So that's the story here, but this is where the world was introduced to Hercule Poirot, and I think that's very interesting. I'd love to see how he begins, because I've seen a couple of things where like he's been quite established, so I'd like to see where his story begins. But yes, I picked up these because I'm trying to collect them in these kind of like taller paperback versions, and these happen to be the ones that were there that I didn't own, so I picked those up, and I'm excited about them. I think those are going to be fun, so adding those to the collection. And the rest of the books in here are pre-orders that I've got. The next one is Misrule, which is the second by Heather Walter in the Malice series. I read the first one. I think it came out last year, so I think I read it last year. But the idea of this series is that it is a reimagining of Sleeping Beauty from the kind of like Maleficent character's perspective, and this is just the continuation of it. Also, it is a sapphic romance, so that's exciting. And it ended very interestingly. The first book did, so I'm interested to see how it's gonna continue, and if this is gonna have like a big time gap between the end of the last book and the beginning of this one. It says, yeah, I think there's about 100 years distance between this first book and this one, so I'm very excited to see where we continue. I do believe that it is only a duology, so we will wrap up here, but I really enjoyed the first one, so I did pick up a matching copy. I think these are the UK covers, so I did pick up a matching copy, but I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be good, and I remember liking the first one a lot, so fingers crossed. The next one is a non-fiction pre-order that's actually for my husband, and that is the Office BFFs. This is the, you know, tales and non-fiction stories of the show The Office, written by Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsley. They currently have a podcast called The Office Ladies that my husband listens to religiously, and they basically are rewatching the entire series. Each podcast episode is a different episode from the TV show, and they're rewatching them, bringing in like all the behind the scenes things. It's perfect for fans of The Office, but they decided to write a book. So here it is, and it says here, Tales of the Office from Two Best Friends Who Were There. So yeah, this is quite hefty for the size, but it's fun. You've got like pictures throughout the book. I think this will be a lot of fun for him to read, because he's really enjoyed that podcast series. So this book is for him. And the very last book in this haul is the last pre-order for May, and that is The Emma Project by Sonalia Dev. This is her most recent one, and maybe the finale of the Rajays series, which is a series of contemporary romances that all follow this family called the Rajays, and each book is loosely inspired by a different Jane Austen book. This one is Emma. And this one we do follow, I think, the youngest sibling. He's definitely the youngest brother. I don't remember if he's the youngest sibling. But there's 4 siblings in the Rajay family, and then some cousins and extra stuff. So some of the books follow the siblings, some of the books follow the cousins. This one follows the younger son. His name is Vansh, and he is kind of a philanthropist. He kind of like travels the world. We haven't seen him a whole lot in the series, but he does kind of show up here and there. So we follow him, and we also follow this woman named Nina, who we actually do know from the 3rd book. So I would recommend, like, you don't really have to read them in order, but you do if you don't want to be spoiled for the romances, and this one definitely spoils the 3rd one for sure. But Nina has just gotten out of a very long relationship, and she is trying to start this organization in South Asia, and to hopefully help millions of women. And so then this guy shows up with, and it says on here, a misguided Emma Project, which is his nonprofit or whatever he's trying to do, and they end up both kind of fighting for the same funding, while they have attraction between them, and they kind of have a friends with benefits situation. But I've really enjoyed everything in this series. I think they're all really good because they all tackle some sort of issue, whether it's social, whether it's mental health. There's something that's always being tackled in these books, and I'm excited to see what this one's going to be about. And I like devoured the first 3 in the series in a weekend, which is saying something because I don't do that. I usually take forever to finish series. And I read all of them, like, within days. So I'm excited to get to this one, hopefully this summer sometime. But yeah, I'm so excited I have it in my hands. And that is it. Those are all of the books that I picked up in the month of May. This was quite a video. I do apologize for how long it is. I'm going to blame it on pre-orders because there were quite a few pre-orders for May. But I hope that you enjoyed this video. As always, I will leave everything linked down below if you would like to check any of them out that I was not very good at describing, because I'm sure I wasn't very good at describing a lot of these. So make sure you check all of that down below. But if you have heard of any of the books that I mentioned in today's video, feel free to leave your thoughts down below, or something that you maybe pre-ordered in May. Did you have a lot of pre-orders? Because I know for me, May is the biggest month as far as pre-orders go. And if you'd like to comment something but you're not sure what to comment the like book stack emoji, because there are so many here. I'm not looking forward to putting them back on my shelves. There's just There's so many. But if you liked this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you would like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so don't forget to check all that out, and I will see you guys in my next video.